Hello and hi to everyone. Thank you for coming back to our clips of how to use the basic settings or the first steps in Photoshop. From GrisArt, we are offering you those videos in these days that we have to stay at home and try to make the best way possible through these hours and make fun or whatever you want with our system, Photoshop, with Lightroom, with all the programs that you have, and helps us as a photographer to get the best image possible. In today's class, I will explain you a little bit how to use Camera Raw, the settings that helps us as a photographer to develop the image in the best way possible. And before I start with the technical part or practical part, how to use the Camera Raw, I will show you a little bit and explain a little bit the difference between RAW, DNG file, and some different extension that we have of the file, of the RAW file. Okay, so let's start. Like I said, Camera Raw, it's a software that comes with Photoshop and basically helps us to deliver the RAW file. The RAW file is digital negative, which means that it needs to be processed. It needs to be open so that we can get the best quality possible. We have different RAW files or file name extension depending on the camera type. They came like this. We have CR2, CRW, RAF, ORF, like I said, depending on the camera that you have. But also we have this one here, the last one, which is DNG. DNG also stay for RAW file, a digital negative file, but it comes from Adobe family, or it's better to say it's the property of Adobe, and it helps us to get the raw information, the file, but in open version. What it means in open version? The difference between classic RAW that came directly from the camera, from the sensor of the camera, and the DNG is that the RAW file, it's unprocessed file, or it's unprocessed data. It has all the information inside, so the amount of the information, or the colors, dynamic range, color range, and a lot of other stuff. It's cryptic, it's closed. So we need a program, or not all the programs can read this kind of file. DNG file, it's an open file. Adobe gives us an option that we can convert the RAW to DNG, and it allows us to open with any program. We can preview this file, easily work it, but without lose any information. So the question is, we have to convert all the RAW file from our camera to DNG. It's up to you. If you have a system, an output system, working system, so your workflow works perfectly fine with the files that came from the camera, you don't have any problem. You can work with the original file. If maybe you skip from one computer to another, you have older version of some program, you can find or you can get with some problem, then convert to DNG this file, and you will not have any problem with work it. And another quite a difference is that a RAW file, when we process and when we use a Camera Raw or Lightroom, for example, it comes with a file that is called XMP file. All the information, everything that we adjust goes with this RAW file. DNG automatically, the information, new information, the adjustment that we realize go inside. So there is no extra document, as you will going to see later on in the video. Okay, so don't worry, I will show you all those differences. So let's start and let's see what option Camera Raw gives us. And as a for a photographer workout or workflow, I'm going to show you in different aspects how to use the Camera Raw. So let's start. How to open? So Bridge, we can use it as a platform to launch or to link the Camera Raw directly with Photoshop. Like I said, we have to process the raw files, deliver the raw files to later on, for example, work in Photoshop, or we can automatically save in Camera Raw, and there will be no longer working or adjustment or retouching in Photoshop, okay? We'll see all the steps, but how to work with those images. So for example, I will go on my desktop, double click, and here I have different images. I make a selection of different different photos, from architecture to landscape, nature, highly exposed, high exposed, low exposed, with a little bit of fog and mist, with some distortion, just to show you all those options that you can find and solved in Camera Raw. So let's go step by step, okay? How to open. So first of all, from Bridge, you can, if you remember, check the metadates, create the keywords, check the filters, put the labels, whatever you want to do. Once you select the images that you want to process and you want to work with, we'll go directly, because it's a raw file, in Camera Raw. So I would just select the random images, a few of them, for example, this one, this one, this one. Some they have a little bit more of shadows, and for example, some that have a little bit more of, and why not this one here, highlights. I press enter, and automatically the images are imported in Camera Raw. Camera Raw, like I said, it's a part of an extension of Photoshop to deliver. We can see that the interface, it's create, or it's separate in different parts. Basically, it's four parts. So we have the main menu, the tools that we find, the film stripe, very helpful. On the right, the panel, where we are going to adjust and basically do the majority of our work. And here on the bottom, we have the option, the panel, to save, to change, and to check the size of the image, the depth of the image, the pixel, and a lot of other stuff that's very helpful. We will see just in a few minutes. So to go, for example, from to start, how to start with, or where to start. Like I said, in this case, for the images that I choose, basically we can adjust. They're quite, the exposure, it's quite okay. It's quite good. The balance, the color balance, the temperature, it's correct. But if you want to retouch something, or if we want to adjust, we will use this panel here. On the top, we can see that we have the histogram, very helpful. We can click on those two sides, the left side and right side, extreme, and this will help us to check and preview when we start to lose information in the shadow, or when we start to lose the information on the highlights. When it turns red, it means that all those parts are burning out. So it means that we know that burn pixel, it's a dead pixel, so we lose the information. Or here, when it's blue, it means that it's completely black, so there will be no texture, no information. So it's quite a help, especially sometimes it's very difficult to see that there are parts that are burning, and with those red spots, we know when to stop. If I increase the exposure, I know that I will start to lose the information. So it's up to you. You can unclick. So even if now I move the exposure strike, there we see there is no advisement of color. If I click on, here it is, here appear. Okay, so let's see what basic panel offers us. The first part is the temperature. The temperature, if it's incorrect with the camera, we can adjust and solve a little bit of the problem here. Warm color, or more cold or warm color. Exposure, which moves completely the histogram from left to right. Contrast, it affects blacks and whites. Highlights, move just the medium and right side of the histogram. It avoids to burn out, for example, have too much light and brightness on the image. Shadows, same thing, but on the left side. Bring back a little bit of texture if we lose it, for example, with lower exposure. Whites, just the right side of the histogram, and blacks, just the left side of the histogram, so we put a little bit of contrast. Then we have the option of the texture. Texture is texture and clarity. Those two combinations, it's like a filter, let's say, fake filter, to create sharpness. It works when you have still life photography, when you have object, when you have, for example, nature, but it doesn't work so well, or I don't recommend when we have portrait or when we have skin, because this texture, like I said, it's not sharpness, because sharpness came with the lens, with the camera at the moment of the capture. With those filters, the problem is when we have skin, if there is any imperfection on the skin, it will increase a lot. Or if there is any wrinkles, it will be very, the wrinkles will be quite marked. So it's better to avoid. And of course, vibrance and saturation. Okay, like in Photoshop, just to increase the hue and tone of the color. So this is, like I said, an option that gives us that we can skip the part of Photoshop, and if the image is correct and we don't have to retouch, especially for photojournalism, for example, more nature photography, just to adjust those few spots, perfect, it's worked perfectly fine. Now, for example, here, no, I can, if I prefer those low key tones, I will leave it, but if I want just to adjust a little bit, for example, the image, and to give it back a little bit of contrast color, let's say like this, increase the whites and increase the blacks. Now I can close, and this is how it is. Maybe the texture a little bit, and here it is. No, it's a personal taste. Or for the highlights, you see automatically, this is the highlight, it's raw, how it came from the camera. I can just lower a little bit the highlight, so I can bring back the texture and also the detail a little bit of the sky. But if I prefer and I like this kind of tone, this kind of atmosphere, perfect, I will leave it. Maybe I will just bring back a little bit of blacks, and you see that the color automatically start to increase, and that's it. Or for example here, I like the image, but for example here, the exposure is correct in terms of how it was exposed and measured at the moment of the capture. But for example, you can see that it's out of balance on visual terms. It seems like it's falling a little bit on the left. In this case, we have a tool, which is this one here, that helps us. It's like a strike. It helps us to recompose the image and put the image in a level. I will show you. So here it is. It's vertical, so I will draw down like this. And you see automatically, if I press enter, you see automatically camera raw adjust the image in the correct way. I can also, for example, use the crop tool, which is this one here, crop tool, because I create already the balance. It seems like it's falling, it's still falling on the left, but don't worry. Here, for example, with the crop, I can adjust and crop the part that I'm interested in. If I press and maintain the pen with the tablet pressed on, I can see that I can choose the size, or I can choose the dimension of how I want to crop. 2 to 3 will be the classic size, no? The sensor size, let's say, and here it is, enter, and I have the image. If I don't like how much I crop, or if I want to bring back a little bit of information, remember, in RAW or with raw files, we cannot lose the information. We can always go back to the original file. So if I just go back to the tool, you see, I can get all the information or all the image, more or less. Here it is. Yes, so perfect. We cannot lose. Or in this case, for example, I would just, based on the histogram, go back a little bit. You can see how I get the sky, lower a little bit the highlights, and then I would just get lower with the backs. And to avoid this effect of out of balance, I will just draw and go on the horizontal line. You see, this part will be cropped out, and here it is. We have the image perfectly balanced. Yeah, it also works perfectly fine, this basic panel, for example, for mist, no? When we have a little bit more of fog. The fog, for example, increase, or we can increase the information, especially if we start a little bit to burn with highlights or shadows, now depending how much information you want to use. And here also we have the shades option, which helps us, for example, to create even more fogginess, or for example, a little bit more of focusing, cleaning the image, so bringing back the contrast, the real original contrast. And let's say I will leave it like this, and say I can play a little bit with texture or clarity. Okay, it's really up to you, but like I said, depending on what kind of image you have, it could work or not. Yeah. For example, another tool, I'll just show you this now. I can also draw. Okay, I will just crop a little bit, just to show you later on that you can also always go back. Another tool that we can use from this basic panel, it's also the curve, the tone curve. If you prefer to work, or if you work better with curve instead of the basic panel, you can easily work. It's like in Photoshop. Or to go a little bit more specific and more in detail, now just step by step, have 3 points more, so it will be easily to work out or just to manage. Yes. And here, for example, it's a tool of sharpness that brings us a little bit the detail and helps us to develop all those small spots, or just create a fake sharpness. What I mean with the detail, here, for example, the texture and clarity has this create this kind of fake effect, no, or effect of the sharpness, because increase the exposure and the contrast of the pixel. But if I move with Command Plus, I just zoom in. If I move the amount of the sharpness, I can see that I get more detail. Depending on the kind of images if you have more highlights, if you have more light, if you have more shadow, it will work to increasing the detail or the reduce. Okay, it's really just check and see when we start to get more information. Remember, very important thing, that when we increase amount, we are also increasing the noise. So with more noise, we will have to play with luminosity. Luminosity reduce the noise. Okay, so be careful and just play with those two stuff. Once we are done, we press Command 0, so we have full size image again. Once we finish, we are done. We have here 3 options, and the 4th one is on the left side. We can save the images. We will go on Film Strike, select all, and we will save it in case later on I will show you we want to save. Or we can open in Photoshop. Cancel, it means that nothing will be saved, nothing will be done, or done. What's the difference? Open image, it means that, like I said, directly we have to go back to Photoshop and process the image. If I click done, it means that all the changes, everything that I change here in this platform, so on the basic panel, we will save, or will be done in Bridge. So the raw file will get this information saved, and anytime I can go back and just change all those adjustments that I just create. So I click done, and now I'm back to Bridge. I can see that I have these small icons on the files that I just develop, or I just process in Camera Raw. What it means? It means that this icon shows us that the image was opened and processed. You see, the rest doesn't have it because we didn't retouch nothing, or we didn't open it. But if I double click on the file, I can see that here, basic panel, it how I leave it. It means that everything it's from the last step, now before I save it. If I want to go back to the original file, so to the original row, and put everything on 0 by default of how it came from the camera, I can press here. You see, before and after, I can see how it looks like. So this is the advantage to have raw file that I can always go back. I never lose the information. So I think it's quite cool. Let's see what other options we can find or what other tools camera rolls. Now I'm going to choose just the 2 different images to show you some other options that we have. This one, for example, for architecture and photography, it's very, very helpful. The next one that I'm going to explain you. Still, I will always start with the basic panel. So for example, lower a little bit the highlights. Even here, we have the pixel gone. Same thing I can do with the other one, you see? For example, I can lower a little bit, then I can, for example, if it seems like it's falling a little bit, I can adjust. Here it is. I don't like Command Z, step back. What else? For example, I can increase a little bit the shadow so we'll have more light. I like the color, so I will leave it. Here, for example, we can go with the hue and saturation on light, shadow, and the tone. For example, if I want to change a little bit the saturation of the sky, I can affect just the blue part or completely convert it in grayscale. For example, the orange, so I can go by zone, retouching and adjusting a little bit the colors. Then, for example, we have the split toning. I don't recommend so much to use this tool here because it's not so helpful for photojournalism, travel photography, architecture, whenever we want to maintain the regional aspect of the image, so the colors, the regional color range, etc. If you want to exaggerate to create something more different, go for it. I will just go back to this image here because I want to show you now the next tool, which you can use with any kind of shot, but here, this example, it's very helpful to show you. The lens correction. The lens correction, it's a fantastic option that gives us to avoid a little bit those defects that came with the lenses or with the camera. We have 2 options, automatic and manual. The automatic, by clicking on those 2 options, we will remove the chromatic aberration and we will enable profile correction, which is the one that comes depending on the type of camera and lenses that we are using. So check out now on this aberration, red aberration we have here, how it disappears by clicking on the remove correction. You see, bam, gone. Perfect, very helpful. And the other tool, it corrects a little bit the distortion that comes with the lens. Manual, same thing, but manually we can adjust and we can clean or remove aberration, chromatic aberration, and also, for example, the vignette effect, like here in this case that we have it. But more than this lens correction, or apart from the lens correction for architecture, we have, for example, a tool, which is this one here, transform tool, very helpful because it almost works like tilt and shift lenses. If we cannot afford, we can correct the architecture image with those tools. Vertical, you see, horizontal, if we have to switch, rotate, if you have to incline the image a little bit, so to avoid the falling effect, aspect, scale. Now I will increase the scale just to crop a little bit the image, so I will not have this border here. So a little bit of scale. I will just load, here it is. And for example, we can move a little bit left or right, depending how much we want to crop or just to maintain. I will, okay, here it is. So it helps us a little bit to get somehow the effect or to correct all those parts that could be very difficult to correct without using tilt and shift camera, a lens. Not always we can have a lens for architecture and photography. So this setup, this platform can easily helps us to maintain the aspect that we are looking for. Let's say that I want now, instead of done, maintain the information file of raw in bridge or on the raw file I want to save. I will click both and I will go here, save image. Here on the save, it's basically like in all Adobe platform or all Adobe menu. I can choose the destination, so the location, select folder, for example, I will go with new folder, buildings, select. We can choose document name, file name, perfect. This is example how it looks like, or I can put, I don't know, building 1. It will appear like this. Extension, if you want in capital or in small letters, perfect. And here quality, 1012 maximum quality. I will leave it as it is. Color space as it is, and image size because it's for web, perfect. 72, 106, perfect, and save. Now it's saving. I can see the remaining part, perfect, and I will do done. You see, it automatically appears the icon because it's still there with information. If I want to go back and remove everything that I have done, I just double click or enter. I go inside and I can, you see, I can remove everything that was done. And here also I can go back and clean and put it on 0. Yes. If I go on my desktop, buildings, see, here I can find the JPEG image and JPEG information. Now, also, let me go just for a second, choose another image. For example, I will go with this one here. One click. Okay, here it is. We can also have another tools or some other tools that we can use, which are more, for example, visual, or to avoid the step to go to the Photoshop and retouch everything and adjust here in camera raw. So same thing, I will just activate both options. Here they are. Make it a little bit more like spring look. So I will just increase a little bit the vibrance, so a little bit of the color. Let's put a little bit of texture. If I'm not sure, I will just zoom in. Perfect. There is a little bit of noise, so we can go on luminosity. Perfect. Let's zoom out. And here, for example, we can find, if you stay on, you can see the name of the tool, graduate filter or radial filter. Radial filter, let's see, I can draw and create an effect like on of the vignette, which I will use. So we draw the circle, and then with the basic panel, I can create a little bit more of lower texture, adjustment, and put the contours, color, whatever I want, for example, on the outside part of the image. Yeah. Make softer, perfect. Now, if I click on the next one, which is gradient filter, for the same, you see, if I click from one to another, change just a little bit. Here, for example, it works like this. I can draw the light and see, create the gradient. So I would just dark a little bit the upper part, and it looks like a little bit more out of focus, for example. Now click on the hand and I'm back to the basic panel. So if I want to put a little bit more of generic information, generic color and light, no less, perfect. Here it is. Same thing, I can save or I can go on done. And here it is. The information is inside the file. Now here I have the DNG file. I will double click. DNG file, like I said previously, it's a raw file. Okay, I will just change a little bit the information because what I want to show you is how the file looks like once when it's saved. Here I have the images. Now, if I open the file where I have my images, so like this, I will show you. Perfect. I'm in camera raw images, camera raw images. This is the finder. So this is the finder. This is the bridge. In the bridge, we see just the icon. So we know that the image, the raw file was processed, was developed, and there are some changes. In Finder, I cannot find any information, or there is zero. If I, for example, increase the raw file, I see it how it is, the original one, still with the chromatic aberration, with vignette, and many other stuffs. But where is the difference? The difference is that here I can see the XMP file. The XMP file is basically this icon. It means that it goes with raw. But if I check, I will just make it bigger so I can show you. Okay. If I go with DNG, you see, there is no, don't worry, I will delete it. DNG doesn't have the XMP. The other one that I deleted goes with this one, CRJ. If I delete, you see, my DNG still have here the icon. But if I delete the XMP from the raw file, check out. So I will delete this one. Check this one here, delete. You see, the icon disappear. It means that I delete everything, all the information that I retouch in camera raw. Okay, so this is the main difference between DNG, or one of the differences between DNG and the raw file. The raw file have this extension that we always have to copy to maintain our work. DNG, the information, XMP file, let's say, go inside. So even if we move the file from one disk to another, from one computer to another, we don't have to copy nothing but just the image. Raw file, we have to copy raw file, and XMP in case that we retouch the image in camera raw. What else? For example, here, very helpful for when we have a section in for fashion photography, advertising photography, or still life photography. When we want to create a sandwich effect, so when we have multiple shots and we want to use one part of one image to create retouch the final version, camera raw, it's very helpful. I will select all of them, enter, and I will open in camera raw. The first shot comes with color checker, so it helps me to put the correct color balance, so the temperature. And then the rest, one it's for the shadow, one it's for the brightness, for the some spots, for the top. No? Like you normally work in the studio for create the sandwich effect. How we work? So first of all, one very important thing is that if you notice, when I, for example, stay on the image, is the one that I use in the preview. Now look and pay attention. First of all, I want to apply the correct or the same color balance to all the images because they all came from the same condition. Now they are all of them are in the studio, and I want to bring the original temperature, so I have really the correct color balance. I select all. On the image that I stayed, even if they are all selected, this is the one that appear. Yeah, perfect. I have here the white balance tool, drop counter, and I will now select the medium gray, which will give me the correct temperature. Here it is, or for example, here on the color checker. So if I click, you see, automatically all of the images are corrected with the same temperature. one will be darker, one will be brighter, because the flashes, the position of the flashes and the lights, of course, was different, but the temperature, it's united. So it means that the blue and the tone that I have on the bottle of the wine would be the same on all of them. Same thing happen, for example, if I select all of them, if I change something. Now here, be very careful, because I have different condition of the light, and from one image I will need for the top, from one I will need from the label. So be careful with this tool when you have of the images, all the images selected. For example, look what happened. I select this one in the middle, but still I will select all of them because I'm on this one here, on the third one. Okay, this is the one that I will preview. If I, for example, change the temperature on all of them, the temperature will change. If I, for example, increase the texture, all of them will be change and adjust with the texture. Same thing with the highlights, low lights, no? So more shadow, less shadow. Everything changed in based on the adjustment that I'm created, no? So, like I said, be careful with this tool when we want just to adjust, like in this case, the color, the balance, the temperature, and all the rest will go one by one and select. Now, for example, I will select all of them and I will save it once again. But instead of JPEG, for example, just put the name, I will save it in TIFF. We have also the PSD option. I will save it in TIFF. It's not so heavy, and still I can work and process and in later on in Photoshop. I will not change the size of the TIFF, yeah, because I want the size. Same thing happened, for example, if you go on PSD, resize, I don't want to resize. For example, if you click don't enlarge, it stay in the same way. And of course, I will go once again on the desktop, new folder, and I will create, for example, here, the new material. We wait to save it. And once they are saved, if there is no need to go directly to Photoshop, we will go and click done. Here it is, the modification, and here we are. The last thing that I want to show you is the information. It's about the size, the pixels, the color space that we have on this image. If I click here, see, I can find, and same thing, I can resize a little bit the information, but also without going through Photoshop, I can change the resolution. Be very careful, because if you change, one thing is when we are saving the images, we are physically saving those images that are film stripe selected. If we click the workflow option, we change the workflow, like the name say. It means that all the images, once they're open, they will have the space that we put, the depth that we put, the size, so the resolution. If we live in 72, all the images directly in Photoshop are going with 72. Or, for example, if we want to convert in smart objects. So I suggest you to leave the space in Adobe RGB 98, 8 or 16 byte, depending, for example, later on in Photoshop, how much you want and how much deeper you want to go with the adjustment of the color, and resolution 300, which is the best option to retouchment. And later on, even if it's for print out, there will be no problems. Okay, so I will leave it like this. So leave it as it is. If there is any, if you always had no work for the retouchment of the image and for save it in for a website or to upload to a website, you can put 72. But remember, later on, all the images, all the file, all the raw files, once opened in Photoshop, they will be open with 72 of resolution. Okay. So, for example, in basic panel, instead of color, of course, I have also black and white option. So I will just change a little bit. I will just open and put the option of black and white. And black and white, for example, I think if I increase a little bit the texture with put the spot a little bit. Okay, let's go this more dramatic look, just a little bit, perfect. And let's put on done. You will see it's black and white. It's black and white, I repeat once again, because it's the last option. It's the last step that we create, or it's the last thing that we use or that we retouch in Camera Raw. If I double click once again, yeah, and I or go here color, I will get the color. But I can also go with option with before and after option to see how it looks like. If I click done now, you will see that there is still the icon because I didn't delete the black and white. It's still there, but I just show you the preview. Didn't change or didn't delete, nothing. Just hide for the moment in the preview. So I hope that this class was helpful for you, that I show you a little bit through Camera Raw to this option. They're very, very easy. The icon or more or less the interface of the Camera Raw, it's very easily designed. Like all the Adobe more or less menu information or panels we can go through and easily work out. What is important, once again, is that remember, whatever you change in Camera, whatever modification, whatever you save in Camera, you will never destroy your original file. So don't worry. Use all the tools, all the basic panel with moderation, in case that we are speaking of photojournalistic nature photography. In case of fashion photography, advertising photography, adjust highlights, shadows, those small spots. Then we always prefer to go directly in Photoshop to retouch more in the detail and with more preciseness. For the rest, just enjoy, be creative, get fun, and with all the doubts, all the questions that you have, please, you can always leave the comment right down on the YouTube, or you can always and at any moment with all your doubts and questions, send me an email, which I will leave on the bottom of this video, on the description. You can find my email to email me with all the doubts, questions, or even examples, for example, if you want to send me. Okay? Stay home, stay safe, and see you next time. Bye-bye.